What's going on, everybody? This is Island Hopper TV, and today we're going to talk about the things to know when visiting Ecuador. Let's do it. The first thing you need to know is the arrival process into Ecuador. So if you're coming from the US, you get 90 days visa. If you wanted to extend, you can either go to Peru and come back, or go to Colombia and come back, or you can actually just go to the embassy and apply for a visa extension. There are multiple different options, but when you arrive in Quito or Guayaquil, Quito being the main arrival area, you can expect to wait in line anywhere from 0 minutes, because sometimes the line can move fast to get through immigration, to all the way up beyond an hour. It just depends on how many flights are arriving at the same time as you, because the immigration processing in Quito is kind of small. So if 3 aircraft are arriving at the same time, one from Spain, one from Miami, and one from, say, Santiago, Chile, it's not good. That's what happened to me. But I talked to people in the line and they said that it sometimes moves very quickly. That was the first time they ever seen a line. Also, it depends on if it's holiday season. I arrived right before Carnival, which is a very crowded time in Ecuador. Now let's talk about the money situation. So the US dollar is the primary currency. They do have some coins that are like Ecuadorian coins. I don't know what they're called, but they also deal with quarters. So you'll have like a mix. But when it comes to the paper money, it's all US dollars. When you go to the ATM, it's US dollars. I have used my cards consistently. Although when you do go to a bank, you'll probably want to go to Pichincha International Banking, because I have gone to some banks that did not do Visa. They only did MasterCard. So that can be a thing. But yeah, card is widely accepted except for with the taxis. You gotta carry cash. I would say never discard any coins, because coins go a long way here in Ecuador. Now let's talk about the best places to go while in Ecuador. So obviously Quito, the capital, is the area you'll arrive. It is worth checking out for around 3 days, 72 hours. Also going to Mitad del Mundo, which is the center of the earth. And you can stand in 2 different hemispheres at one time, because that's where they say is the middle of the earth. Mundo in Spanish is world, or in English is world. Also, Galapagos. There's several different islands that you want to check out. Santa Cruz, San Cristobal. Galapagos are quite far. It's a 2.5 hour, 3 hour flight from Guayaquil, or even Quito. It's even longer than that. So getting out to the Galapagos, probably one of the more famous places in all of Ecuador. But from Quito, you can easily go to Otavalo, which is a place I would suggest going if you want to spend a little bit more time in Quito. Spend a day going out there. They have some beautiful hotels over there. I made a review of it on my other channel, Island Hopper TV Hotels. If you want to go to Baños, that's about a 3 hour drive from Quito. Depends on traffic though, it could be longer because it's one way. Well, there's 2 roads, but they get congested, especially on holidays. But Baños is like the adventure capital. Right on the other side of Baños is the jungle, the Selvo. Then there's the Avenue of the Volcanoes, Chimborazo. There's obviously Pichincha and Quito, but 84 volcanoes here in Ecuador. Definitely something to keep on your radar. They even have some active ones. Pichincha erupted a few years ago. And then there's Cuenca, which is actually where I'm at right now. They say this is the most romantic, best city you can go to. Now let's talk about transportation here in Ecuador. So arrival by airplane into Quito or Guayaquil. There's not really international arrivals or departures into Cuenca that I've seen. Might be an international airport, but it seemed like those are the 2 main airports that you'll arrive in. For example, I'm departing to Lima today after a week in Ecuador, and I'll be leaving Cuenca to Quito and then flying out to Lima from Quito. Now, getting around Ecuador by rental car, I would not suggest driving at night. It can be a bit unique at night because people like to overtake people on these roads. The roads are not in the greatest conditions. So if you do get a rental car, I wouldn't even recommend that so much, but people do it, you know. I would suggest getting a shuttle or a taxi to go long distance and letting the locals drive you. But if you do get a rental car, I would not suggest driving at night. Early morning hours may be okay. Like getting an early start, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. You can beat traffic and all that, especially in the big cities. Transportation in the Galapagos, you gotta fly out there, but then you can take boats in between the islands. Overall, I would say, for me, I rented a taxi driver, or I got a taxi driver who took me around. To go from Quito to Baños, that was $150 a day. And then to go from Baños to Cuenca, that was like $200. I'm pretty sure if I asked him just to go from Quito to Cuenca by car, it probably would have been $250 because it's a long route. I mean, lots of switchbacks. In Quito, they did have Uber, although it's not necessarily legal, but I prefer Uber anyway, just because there's that paper trail or documentation, who you're with and all that. Whereas with a taxi, you just basically are like, hey, let's go. And it seems safe enough, but you never know. Although, like I said, it's not legal, Uber. So I did see it in Quito. I'm not seeing it here in Cuenca. But those are the main things to know about that. And then there's buses. Buses are very popular. They even have luxury VIP buses, which is good. The buses here are probably better than you find in Canada or in the United States. About on par with Europe, maybe better actually. So the VIP bus is definitely a good way to get around. It's a bit slower than a taxi though, but definitely more affordable. Some interesting facts about Ecuador. So it's called Ecuador because it sits along the equator. Obviously you can find the middle of the world and mitad del mundo. Mundo, again, means world in Spanish. But some other things, there's 5 UNESCO World Heritage sites here. There's 84 volcanoes. The total population is around 17 to 18 million. The largest city in Ecuador is Guayaquil, but the capital city is Quito. Quito has about 2 million people. Guayaquil sits around 2.5 to 3 million people. Some of you scientists may find it interesting that Charles Darwin used the Galapagos Islands as his reference point for the theory of evolution that he established. So that's where he founded it. Also in Ecuador, the government and the people recognize nature as having rights. And now let's talk about safety. So you can see they've got police officers driving by here. But yeah, talk about safety now. So as you guys may know, there was a uprising that occurred, civil unrest situation in January, and they've had a curfew the whole time I've been here. Technically can't go out past 12, but before it was 10. Might even been earlier than that. In Quito it seems safe, in Baños it seems safe, here in Cuenca it seems safe. But I've heard multiple times Guayaquil is not safe from Ecuadorians. That's the only people who told me don't go to Guayaquil. They said if you do go, you can walk around the city center, historical area, but everything around there outside of that, probably shouldn't go. Actually made me so nervous based on what they were telling me that I didn't even want to fly out of Guayaquil. So I'm going to be departing out of this beautiful city of Cuenca. Amazing. It would be a 3-hour drive, 4-hour drive to Guayaquil. But I'm going to skip it this time. Really cool house. Anyways, as far as safety goes, probably the most dangerous thing that I've seen or felt or experienced was the driving. Even as a passenger in a taxi or in a public transport, I just feel like the roads here are just, and the drivers, it's kind of like the Wild West driving out here. Also, I think the altitude sickness, like just walking, I think you could overdo yourself if you go too high. Altitude sickness is probably a thing. But yeah, the driving, probably the most dangerous thing I've seen. And it's not really that dangerous, it's just the cars that I was in didn't have lights. Maybe the brakes weren't so good. You know, it's just lower income area. So driving is a bit dangerous. Walking, not so dangerous. Now let's talk about the people here in Ecuador. From my experience, I've had extremely genuine interactions, especially with the indigenous people, but also the, you know, just Ecuadorian people who are not indigenous, very friendly. I mean, they smile a lot. Every time you talk to them, they say something with a smile on their face. I don't think I've come across any hostility the whole time I've been here. You'll see, we're just walking through here. You can see just a very happy place, not very expensive, and very simple, not corrupted by the material world, and it's a very nice place to be. They've got a church service going on Tuesday morning. Okay, now let's talk about the climate, or the climate zones, the weather. So obviously with Ecuador being right there on the equator and then having high elevations, that creates an interesting dynamic with wildlife. So not just wildlife, but in particular plant life. So you have high alpine above the clouds, obviously, places like Chimborazo. You also have Quito, which is a very lush forested area with mostly palm tree or pine trees and some palm trees, but the sun there is very, very bright, especially on a clear day, because of the high elevation and the Ecuador sun. It can get very hot right there with that sun. Okay, so this is the same here in Cuenca. Actually, I prefer Ecuador when there's clouds, to be honest with you. But once you go into lower elevations like Guayaquil or Salinas or Esmeralda or even the Galapagos Islands, it's hot and humid just like any beach climate in the tropics. So you step outside and it can get very hot. But I've also experienced very cold situations where I needed a jacket up high in the Andes. So depending on where you're going, you're gonna need a whole variety of clothes for your suitcase, especially if you plan to go up into the Andes. Pack warm clothes. The higher you go, it's going to get very cold. They even have snow on Chimborazo. And when it comes to winter or summer, they don't really experience too much diversity. It's kind of temperate here, stays pretty consistent, but they do have a little bit of winter. It would be more in line with what you have in North America.
Thank you everyone for watching Island Hopper TV. If you enjoyed this one, please consider watching another one of our videos. We have a recommended video and another video for you to watch next.